Ivan Pavlenko from Family to Family. Chapter 3, Part 6.2, Rise and Fall, read by Natalia Buzova. Then take the Department of Culture of the District Executive Committee. There, for the time being, you will be an inspector and at the same time acting head of the department. We fired Eliseev for drinking, Fedorko summed up. So I got out of the stinking cellars into the cultural field. I was satisfied, but they didn't approve me for the position of head. I didn't have a completed secondary education, but it would be better to even have a higher one. Where did I start my work? First, I reread all the previous directives from the Regional Department of Culture, as well as the resolutions of the District Committee of the party and the District Executive Committee on holding cultural events. I also got acquainted with the long-term work plan of the department for the year and the previous work plans. I went around the district to get acquainted with them and with the personnel. And in almost every village, I was offered a snack or a drink. So the intoxicating style of work of my predecessor dived out. At the very first meeting in the regional department, I sternly warned those who considered cultural work through a 40-degree alcohol bottle. Every month, the manager and I held seminars with cultural workers at which we helped them to strengthen the work of cultural services for rural workers during the period of basic agricultural work, to introduce new customs and rituals, and to raise the general cultural level of the rural population. But I also did not stay long in the Regional Department of Culture, only for 4 months. It was at this time that personnel leapfrog took place in the District Committee of the Komsomol. And then the Secretary of the Komsomol Regional Committee, Ivan Shvets, came to the next showdown. Kozlov Vladimir, who had previously been the second secretary, was elected the first secretary. He was a youth leader by vocation, fiery on the podium and fighting in practical life. I was chosen the second secretary. So I got, one might say, into my environment, like a fish into a turbulent river. This position was considered prestigious and promising, and my salary increased to 900 rubles. I was united by mutual friendship with Kozlov and Shumilov. We worked together with a twinkle and well-done enthusiasm. I was mainly responsible for organizing the political education of Komsomol members in local circles and political schools, as well as for mass cultural work and sports work. I was well acquainted with the specifics of Komsomol work in the countryside, and I often traveled to collective farms, raising young people to various Sunday work competitions and production records. A separate book could be written about this. I changed myself. I became an active conductor and propagandist of the Marxist-Leninist ideology. It seemed to me that the ideas of communism were the most advanced and most human in the world, that they most fully and deeply met the interests of the common people. That is why we needed to fight for their implementation. It was the most joyful and full-blooded period of my life. But my family affairs could not be called as gratifying. I lived in Yashniki and worked in Lochvitsa, covering 5 kilometers every day in the morning and in the evening. Sometimes I spent the night somewhere in the villages. There was almost no help from me at home. Our entire household, a cow, pigs, chickens, a garden, was supported by Shura, having 2 children in her arms, a son, Grigory, born in 1947, and Volodymyr, born in 1950. And she worked on the collective farm, and in winter she also dragged firewood and reeds from the meadow with a sled. I dreamed of moving my family to Lochvitsa, but my position was not yet high enough to get an apartment out of any queue. In October 1952, I was transferred from Komsomol work to party work. When they claimed, the first secretary of the district party committee said, "Your education is not enough, but you are a smart guy. You will work for a year or two, and then we will send you to study at a party school." I immediately received an apartment and moved my family to Lovitsa and covered my house with boards. My work was calmer in the party apparatus. My duties included preparing decisions of the district committee bureau on ideological issues, as well as memoranda after various checks. All this work began with the field trips and ended with endless scribbling at the desktop. But 6 months later, I suddenly fell off the political Olympus and rolled down. Once, the head of the KGB regional department came into my office and, looking into my eyes, asked, "How is your injured heel?" "Fine," I answered, "healed." And at the same time, it flashed through my head. He got to the bottom. "And why did you mention my heel?" I asked. "We are looking for a suitable candidate to work in our bodies," he rounded off diplomatically and left the office. I realized that he had subtracted that heel from my dossier, which obviously had been traveling with me since 1945 and is currently in his department. On the second or third day, the head of the organizational department, Ryabchenko, called me and said there was information about my being in captivity. I confirmed it. Then he offered to write explanations. I honestly and frankly wrote that I had been taken prisoner, been seriously wounded, and when I returned home, I was not hired anywhere. It was hard and deplorable that they didn't trust me for my shed blood, and I had to hide my stay in captivity. At a party meeting in the district committee, they listened to me and handed down a punishment, a severe reprimand with an entry in a personal file for deceiving the party when joining its ranks. It was bitter and painful, but this decision suited me. But something unexpected happened. At the bureau of the district committee, the secretary of the regional party committee, Bulani, had just arrived. He said, "We are not restoring the party communists who were in captivity. Why should he be the party member?" Pressed against the wall, as they say, the members of the bureau dutifully voted for my expulsion. It happened on March 16, 1953, 11 days after Stalin's death. The tyrant himself was no longer there, and his cannibal system, by inertia, continued to cripple human souls. In those days, my moral state was oppressed and depressed. All my efforts to be promoted ended in complete failure. I was fired from work in the district committee on the same day, and they didn't say anything about my further employment. Only the next day, the secretary of the district committee, Fedorka, called me and said the following: "Do not lose heart and file an appeal with the regional party committee, and we'll get you to work. Maybe you will be the head of the sawmills." He had treated me favorably since the Komsomol times and had always been my protege when I was moving up the career ladder. And now he hinted that changes were coming in the party and the state, and the attitude towards those who had been in captivity and in the occupied territory should also change. I thanked for the good attitude towards me and said that I would not go to any work in the regional center, but would return home to Yashniki. I had my own house and my people there. I had come out of the S and I would return to the S. And if possible, I would like to start working in a rural library in order to finish evening school and study further in absentia. He promised to give the corresponding order to the cult department and shook my hand in parting. After some time, he himself resigned from the post of the third secretary of the district committee to become the director of a secondary school. I returned with my family to my native village and became the head of the library with a monthly salary of 475 rubles. We began to live again like all rural people. We had 0.25 hectares of a garden. We bought 2 piglets, got chickens, and most importantly, now I was at home with my family and in my own house. Work in the library was calm, without anguish, typical for all previous stages of my service. Shura worked on the farm from 1953 to 1957. Every year she earned 350 workdays at a rate of 120 per year. In 1958, Natasha was born and Shura was at home, and in 1959-1960 she worked as the head of a nursery. Stalin was dead. The funeral was pompous. Above the coffin, the comrades in arms swore to continue his work. Consequently, there would obviously be no warming of the political climate. However, I decided to appeal to the regional committee of the party. A month later, I was invited to the bureau of the regional committee, and despite any exculpatory evidence, I was expelled from the party. The bureau was led by Stahursky, the first secretary of the regional committee. After information from the head of the party commission and my explanation, he briefly summarized and delivered a verdict. We believe that you were taken prisoner being wounded, but we do not know what you did there in a hostile environment and with what ideological baggage you returned from there. He promised to confirm the decision of the district committee of the party. There were no objections. When I was leaving the office, my party card passed into the hands of a policeman, and I, being finally finished off, went home.